What do you make of a thing like the Blue Brain project, if you heard about that, to basically create, a synthetic brain? It's the whole.
That I think would work because it's beyond your control. Just the way the neural net programs initially offered us the prospect for an artificial intelligence like structure. Just like Anderson does not deal with time, he deals with closed time like loops. The neural network approach to things was actually a artificial intelligence like operating system approach. It had some attempt or some potential because it had the ability to have things happen that were outside the original constraints of the programmers. Now, neural network, you don't write the software. You just write little tiny nodes, and then you make millions of them and see what happens when you put them all together. But
Yeah.
again, even so, none of those little nodes can ever expand themselves enough to accept new information. If you didn't build that little node to accept that particular kind of information, it's never going to see it, and it's never going to respond to it. It can never grow that way. Therefore, it can never be artificially intelligent.
And what this is showing, of course, is also that we inherently, with the scientists that are doing this kind of stuff, has a limited awareness and knowledge of what a human being is. They think that they can just
Correct.
recreate the neural network, and hence life will appear, spontaneously within
I
there.
bet you also, as a rule, you can probably say that most of the academics and most of the people involved in those attempts and most of the military minds that are involved in the artificial intelligence world and most of the compartmentalized military minds and scientific minds, I bet you none of those bastards were psychedelic users. Well, and probably none of them ever did any entheogens of any kind, and they probably have a really sketchy relationship with their own bodies.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. But some of them do, though. I mean, if you look at some of the tech industry, anyway, I mean, people like, well, we know about everyone from Bill Gates up to Steve Jobs, of course, but many of the people who were involved in designing the computers and coming up with many of the things we're using today, they were heavily involved in some of the psychedelic
Which allows
period
them
there.
to
So
recognize some things
yeah,
correct. But
yeah.
the people that are all in the compartmentalized areas are just are a different mindset, and they're very much like the neural net. They're never going to stumble to any of these ideas. To a certain extent, I don't know Anderson. I don't know him at all, but I'd be willing to bet he's not going to think about it the same way I am. He's not going to tumble to the idea of the EPN and what's going on relative to the genetics involved in that because he won't look at it from this particular viewpoint, probably because he doesn't meditate and go into the stream. So, and I never would have stumbled to it unless I'd taken all that acid when I was a kid.
And,
So,
and what about an alien artificial intelligence, not man-made, but coming from somewhere else?
Okay, now that I don't call an artificial intelligence. That I call a construct, or you can call them an accumulation or an aggregation. I got a friend of mine that calls them a thick syrupy mass, and that exists. Okay, I'm quite convinced that this being that has no vowels, okay, in its name, that the early purveyors of perfidy that we call religion, that adopted a religion they called Judaism, fell under its sway. And that is a construct being. That is not a god. That is a very powerful being that has absorbed personalities and consciousness and floated around quite a bit on the energetic stream, operates at a vibrational level that we cannot perceive, but it is able to exert its influence down at our vibrational level. And it is a very nasty, ugly thing. It is not an organic creature, as I am able to determine. Again, all of this is my impression and tempered by my poor, twisted, warped human mind and all the shit I've been through. And the best I can do is to tell you that out on the stream, this thing whose name begins with a Y and who has no vowels in its name is cold. It is hard. It has captured many organic beings within its nature, like the Borg. It's very much like the Borg cube, right?
That's right.
Okay, and maybe that's why they put that in those movies. Maybe that's what they're telling us. But it's in some ways it's very much like that. But the beings within this construct being are suffering. They know they have been captured. And yet they are unable to free themselves. And it's really weird, okay? You run into people like Carlos Castaneda. You run into people when you're a kid, and you run into these the Brujo and the Curandaos, these guys that are native fellows, the shaman, and they'll tell you, oh, kid, there's like 7 plants, don't take any, like the pusher man, don't take anything that isn't plant-based. If you take these drugs, you've got to do it right. You've got to treat it with respect. You've got to be righteous. You've got to understand the rituals involved. And you've also got to understand the nature of the reality in which you are heading, and that there are evil or threatening beings over there. And so there are some beings out on the stream you don't want to go and poke. And this thing with the Y, that being with a name that has no vowels, you don't want to go and poke it. It's very nasty.
Is it still here? Is he?
Oh yeah,
It's hanging around.
Yeah. This is really weird. Okay, from my perspective, looking at things on the computer at the data level, we've had a huge shift in the change of language. We've gone into release language. The shift in the release language was concurrent with a shift in the stream. The stream had changed energetically, perhaps maybe 18, 19 months ago, something like that, taking a big uptick in energy levels prior to the Fukushima thing. I can't relate anything that happens to the stream directly correlating it to reality. There's no point. Again, it would all be speculation. However, the shift into release language has caused a disturbance, or no, it hasn't. Let me rephrase that. The shift in release language is concurrent with a change that I describe as a disturbance within the stream. Okay. This shift in release language came in these last couple of months. We hit it in March, and now we're into just permanent release language. Near as I can tell, there's no longer any building tension language. The media are failing. They'll drop off to nothing by the end of this year. No one will even look at, probably, I don't even think we'll have CNN by the end of the year. Things are going to happen that rapidly as we move forward. But a lot of the things that are occurring here appear to be correlated to the disturbance that's occurring in the stream. And some of the disturbances in the stream are allowing vibrational emanations to come off of the other beings that are also out in the stream, and some of them don't like it much. That's, again, my impression. I'm out in the stream. There's no words. You have to understand what you do is you go park your consciousness when you're doing these kinds of meditation. In my particular case, I discovered the place where I can shut off the linguistic center of my mind by placing my consciousness in a particular place forward and down relative to the linguistic center within its normal relationship. And when I do that, I can then go into the stream because there's no words. There isn't that continuous dialectic that is part of the ever-present now. You ever wonder why that word stream doesn't shut off in your head except for when you go to sleep?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Most people don't discuss that, but I've often wondered about it. Why doesn't it? Why can't I shut it off?
Mm-hmm.
And many people say, well, I've been able to shut it off, but anytime I do that, then my head is filled with a song that I just can't get out, or something along these lines, right? Repetition, repetition, repetition. And this is the basis of the OCD, and it's people identifying with that pulse from the stream, the EPN that we've got to have to maintain our state. When you go off and you do your consciousness raising, and you go through the death and destruction that's caused through the psychedelic drugs, one of the effects of taking a psychedelic drug is in that first peak period, you think you're going to die. You're absolutely sure you're never, ever going to come back from it. Your body's dissolving. It's in 100 million pieces flying all over the place, and you don't know what's going on. Over time, you realize you're not going to die, and you repeat the experience. But the death component of that allows you to see things at a different frequency level. And it is that same kind of experience that you'll tumble to later on if you give up the drugs and go into meditation heavily, and you'll discover that it's all vibration. I had a particular, let's say, extra added push because I invented this software called Vortex that allowed me to read from computer screens very fast by having the computer do all of the reading for me and displaying all of the words. And it did it by displaying them very fast. So I trained my eyes to see things that are flashing at 2,000 words or 2,000 frame rates per second. Now, I don't think I actually see that level in terms of a conscious level.
But you perceive it on the...
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so that level of vibrational training, if you will, has been translated over to the stream. So when you go into the stream and you perceive other beings there, whether they're human or dogs or whatever the hell, I don't know, they're just there, and they are vibrating the same way you are vibrating. And there are subtleties within the level of surface vibration on these beings, because bear in mind, this is, to all intents and purposes, a three-dimensional representation to your mind. And there are these vibrational things that, if you will, occur. And the vibrations that are occurring to the being that has no vowels in his name I'm not perceiving them as good. It's a very unique or distinct change from when I entered the stream, which was way back in 97 or 98. Bear in mind, the first time I fell into the stream, and then in the first year or two, I discovered this being that was there. And I just thought it was, part of the wall, so to speak, right? And it took me a long time to learn enough to be able to discriminate. But there's parts of the wall at the time, if you will, that I would poke mentally, and they would poke back really hard, so you wouldn't want to do that. And then I discovered, oh, okay, I understand what's going on, and I tumbled to the idea of how the 22 trillion times a second works, and that there's other vibrational levels, and of course we're all hamstrung by the fact that we're trying to perceive reality through these really limited senses. And the reason you have the limited senses is entirely because of the brainwashing that you've been under, and because they've eliminated all the shaman from the planet. Bear in mind how the shaman used to work, right? You'd be a guy, it doesn't matter what race you are, you're tribal. You're out there existing on the planet back in those days, before the organization, before this construct being showed up. And there was also something else out in the stream, and I don't know, maybe it's another one of these constructs that's battling with it. But in any event, before all this crap happened, our lives as beings centered around a different interaction with the energetic universe around us. And so the approach to dealing with reality had to do with us creating a common consensus reality. And we still see hints of that and let's look at a movie that came out about your people, okay? The Swedish guys, right? The Vikings and all of that. There's this weird movie, has Antonio Banderas in it, The 13th Warrior, I think it's called.
That's right. He learns the language there and stuff pretty quick.
Right. He teaches himself, okay, linguistic. That's why I tumbled into it. I love that character. He was, and he came to love the Vikings, right? At first he's repulsed by them, but then he came to love them. Now, there's a key thing in there that most people are not going to tumble to, and that is the shaping of the consensus reality. That storyline centers on this. In the beginning of it, you find the Arab is hanging out with the Vikings, and they're all in a camp, and he's thinking, ooh, why am I with all these crude people? They don't know anything. They're not refined. I've got silks. I know what I'm doing, And then the next morning, this little kid shows up with a Viking boat, and he stands out there and just stands there. And the Antonio, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, Antonio Banderas says to his translator, hey, what's up? Why is that guy just standing there? Why didn't he come on up here? And his translator, who's the guy who speaks, the common language of Latin, tries to get the idea across to Antonio that there is a different world that exists in the North, and that the common consensus reality is not created the same way it is within the Arab world. That part of the movie is probably missed by most of the people on the planet who see this.
I didn't recall that. That's fascinating. I would want to rewatch that again. Go ahead, Clif.
Okay, and it has to do with my, like I say, my twisted, warped way of looking at the world and language. Okay, right. And it's the beauty of the language that was involved there, trying to describe this very ephemeral and ethereal nature of human consciousness, where the author or whoever it was that stuck that particular scene in really reached in terms of being a human, because they were trying to say, here is a culture, here are humans that we don't understand from the Arab perspective, that are so strange that they don't know that kid is a real human kid until they've formed a common collective consensus that he's a real human kid. And until then, hey, it's open. It's up for grabs. He might turn out to be, a dragon. He might turn out to be something that we don't want. And we've got to really examine this. And so he is doing the righteous thing of standing there and allowing himself to be absorbed into their common collective consensus. Makes sense?
So this is a fascinating idea, one that I've been, intrigued by for a while, not being limited by, well, I would call it the belief system as well. That when we shape as you said, the consensus reality, a lot of the things that we hear about from the ancient world, potentially makes more sense. That there was actually a time where there were magic, if you will, out there, and there were different types of beings, So
right, it still exists. We're just blind to it.
Yeah, we don't see it.
That's the strange part of it.
Yeah.
And you're quite correct. I don't know if you'll recall, but if you'll go back and listen, I'm willing to make a bet of I'll cook you any pie I can make. That in our previous discussion, I made the comment that I personally, Clif, does not hold to a belief system, because the word belief means I wish this to be true. And it obviously is self-blinding. So what I want is to understand and perceive as it exists. So I don't want a belief system. And the minute someone comes on up and says, and I really hate that word. In our language, is so mind controlling, and that's why the media is so good at it, and really studies it. And if you look at the language and so on, that's basically was why I'm a linguist, because being a software engineer, you deal with language at a level where you actually make things happen from your words.
Yes.
It's very powerful. It's very magical.
Yeah.
And it is magic at a level that our ancestors would perceive that way. You give a word to a machine and it does stuff. Wow. You tell the car to turn on and it does. I mean, you couldn't believe the reaction. So at that level, I started really looking at language and its effect on us, and try and control your own language. For my entire life, I've struggled with my own language, because I was shoved around from culture to culture to culture to culture, and I would bring around with me language patterns that would get the shit beat out of me.
Yeah.
So, as a kid, right? You're always the newbie, and then if you were not careful about the language, so you learned as a kid, as a military brat, you learned to be very adaptive, to pick up the speech patterns and learn whatever was the local language, so you could blend in and avoid that pummeling. And
Yeah.
it was a very good way to learn. And it was a very, I lived in my formative years in Europe in a post-war collection that was a stew of languages. I was in a high school that I think there were 97 different languages in that high school. Exactly. Russian, Czech, Slovak, Swede, Norway, Danish, just everything, because they just shoved all the, the dependents kids into one school to corral them all. This is before they really got set up with the American military's dependent structure throughout Europe. In any event, though, language and its effect on humans, we can't disregard, and that getting us way back to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
That's why, I'm going along, and one of my spiders bring me back this curious bit of language about something I'm concerned with, and the next thing you know, I'm in a fight with Ben Fulford.
This is a very important point, though, and obviously in a little bit here we'll begin to round off, and I want to try it back a little bit more to Fukushima. I still have one question there to ask you, but
sure. It's
interesting to think about why we think in a language, even why our internal dialogue is in a specific language. It's very strange, and when you begin to realize that the homogenization of the language even within a country has also taken place. I remember back in the, well, I don't remember it personally, but I've been reading about it back in the 50s, probably after the World War II. There, even in Sweden here, and they happen in other countries as well. They began to create a consensus Swedish language. There were tons of different dialects with different interpretations, different types of words, even for different things. But it's all been limited all the time. We've gone from a pretty broad language base to less and less and less. And it goes back to 1984 again, right? The destruction of words, because that's also the destruction of what and how you are able to think as a human being.
Correct.
Very important.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why I love this guy, Mario Bilingo, or Biglino. Because he's such a specific word fanatic that he says, okay, this word means this, but hey, it also means this to these people over here and this to these people over there.
Right. Yeah.
And you need to know that, because, for instance, we've got people that are friends of ours that are, actually I can't go into that. Betrays our confidence, but here's another example. The one thing that he actually talks about, the word that the entire Christian domination world, fueled by the Judeo understanding that also permeates Islam, the word that everybody on the planet translates as Holy Spirit, is actually a word in Hebrew that, of course, Hebrew didn't exist at the time the Bible was written, or any of the stuff that supposedly happened in the Bible existed. Hebrew is a made-up language, okay? But the Hebrew word, which is our source for all of this, that word means spaceship.
Really?
Spirit.
Okay.
The word, R-A-U-C-H in Hebrew, means thing that hovers over water like a predator bird, not moving its wings, and it ain't a bird. As they put it in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it hovers over water like a brick doesn't. And the word, Rauch, is the word for spirit that we all take into spirit, but it actually is the word for wind. And if you get into the translation of this, and this is all why I'm a linguist, because when we lose words and lose meaning, someone's controlling us again, right? Yeah. Someone's trying to shovel our thoughts down a particular way. Now, there is one exception to that. That's when you lose all words. When you get to the point where your skill is such in personal meditation that you can park your consciousness and shut off your internal dialogue, an entirely different view of reality opens up. And you can shut off your dialogue. You need not have that kind of connection to the ever-present now. And when you do that, the ever-present now exposes itself in what I call the stream, what Buddha also called the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just convenient to use his terminology because the Buddhists were really fanatic about thinking about this and exploring it all. And so you can think of the pulse that comes out of the middle of the, or comes out of the edges of all of the materium, goes right to the middle of the materium. And because this pulse moves beyond time, and in fact creates time, it's beyond time. And so this pulse happens 22 trillion times a second, and it stops 22 trillion times a second. And as it stops, all of your atoms dissolve, your whole vibrational state dissolves, but that allows you to move. And that whole vibrational frequency thing is exposed at a higher level to our brains, which, bear in mind, only operate at 40 frames a second, when we are able to stop the linguistic center. But something occurred. Now, there's this guy, I think you may have actually interviewed him, that had the book about the origin of the bicameral brain.
Yeah, sure. There was one of the caretakers of that. I mean, we had Marcel Kujestein on the program.
That was it.
And he spoke for James, Julian James, right? So
there you go. There you go. I'm terrible. I can never remember people's names because I moved all around the planet and I know too many people. So it just flies out. But I remember content. That was some damn fine content because that was some really good thinking. So at some point, something occurred to us as a species that was relatively recent, probably did not involve our DNA directly being manipulated because that was, a long time ago. Mm-hmm. But something occurred at an energetic level that caused this connection between our consciousness within our brains and our minds and the ever-present now, and thus sprang up the internal dialogue, your constant brain chatter, monkey mind. Okay, and when you remove monkey mind, which is the whole goal of the yogic arts, and if you go and you listen to Tsarian, you can interpret the arising of the monkey mind as the imposition of all that mind control, because Tsarian is also of the opinion that the yogic arts, which include Taoism, are an attempt to get us beyond this level of destructive behavior that's being imposed on us energetically. Make sense? Did I say that right?
Throw out the Hanuman, as it were. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Okay, so if you chuck the monkey mind and you close down that vibrational level that's always occupying all of your energy and sucking down your calories and your blood and everything just to keep this chatter going, which is useless and meaningless and provides you with no real information about the planet or anything that is useful to you, and is actually really a conduit for the ego and distraction and get you into trouble and all of this kind of stuff. If you can shut that down, you also discover as a side effect an exposure to reality that offers new opportunities for us as a species, new ways to cooperate, new ways to think about things. It changes you in ways that I could not have perceived when I first began this journey back when I was age 11, got hooked on a stolen book about yoga that I stole from a bunch of Nazis. And read in there, the first thing it said, was that Master so-and-so says, beware, if you follow the practices beyond this paragraph, you will be changed at a personality level. And you need to know this. And damned if the bastard wasn't right. So those kind of things do offer the approach for us for being able to do things, measurements, for instance, being able to measure beyond the 8 trillion times a second, but we won't do it with machinery. Being able to get beyond the powers that be by controlling ourselves at a consciousness level. It is more than platitudes. It is more than empty words. It is a statement that can't be really felt or perceived until you've started on that path. But once you get to the understanding that you're on that enlightenment path and you're not going to give it up, you can't be defeated. You can't be killed. You can be destroyed and your body's gone, but that spirit's going to keep on going. Next time you come back, you're going to pick it up again. And they know this, and it's like, that's why they leave people like Ike alone. They don't want to martyr him. They don't want him coming back in another form. And it's going to get that way. Now, our data stuff is a little bit different. When the release language changed, and this is for the people that care about how our procedures go, I'll just go into that real briefly here.
Sure.
I ran into, for years now, since about 2003, I've been running into this thing that I call the data gap. And because I couldn't quite understand it, I called it a gap. It looked like a gap to me. And now I understand that it's not really a gap. What it is a flood, and a change in the way in which people are using the internet and the language they're expressing, such that our data separation into immediacy values, short-term values, and longer-term values has now been destroyed, such that immediacy values are overwhelming everything. Now, in our processing, we have usually used the short-term values to set the archetype, the immediacy values to provide the detail, and the longer-term values to provide the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of support for the detail in terms of how we organize our structure. Once we got waylaid by being flooded out by immediacy values, which blindsided me. I didn't see coming. I actually thought internet would be shut down. When we first started seeing the Arab Spring and they started shutting down the internet, I said to myself, aha, that's it. That's the cause of the data gap. They're going to take the whole internet down and so on. Well, in fact, they're not doing that. And in fact, I still have the same level of processing that still impacted me every bit as bad as having the internet taken down. And that is this change in the language to release language being continuous. And also coincident with that is this uprush in immediacy language. Now, for those that don't know, the immediacy language is effective from 2 to about 3 weeks out to the end of the 3rd week. So my problem is, I've got lots of detail. I got tons of psychic impressions pouring in. But my problem is that most of them are happening before I could get them written up and posted. And also, without the shorter term data, I have very few points upon which to hang the details. In other words, we get a bit of detail that shows an orange sphere associated with the name Fred, associated with a container, and we get data about that in a hanging position that's threatening. But no damn archetype about anything. So we don't have a clue as to what it means, right?
Yeah.
But it was a particularly bright data point within model space. And so we have tons of these details, which once in the previous processing, we would use the shorter term data to set all the archetypes because the detail levels naturally seem to flow into that. It is as though there was going to be, it's basically the flow of language. We have a story that breaks here, and 75 years later, we're still discussing it. That's the Hindenburg. But we're not discussing it in the same terms that we were using at the time that it occurred 75 years ago.
Right.
But we will still occasionally, with our longer range view, use some of those high intensity words, and we will, with a different meaning and a different level of intensity, we will say the phrase, the humanity, the way they did back then, but without that emotional intensity that came across then. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so that's how we separate language, and that's really the flow of it in reality. It takes 75 years for some levels of language to be said about an event. And so if we'd done the forecast for the Hindenburg, we would have to wait to 75 years for all of that long-term language to play out. And that's why we'll call a hit when I have like 18% of the language in 5 groups within the first 4 months, because I'm not going to wait 30 years for it to reach 90% or something. Anyway, our language changed. The rate of propagation of the immediacy values changed, and we find ourselves in this particular flood of immediacy values. Unfortunately, we are able to determine some things, and they're just not very good. The situation July 10th, I don't think will be a good resolution. We still, I believe, have the potential to root out these guys that know how to do the magnetic containment vessels, get them out of whatever holes the government have shoved them into, and haul them up, and we can do this. I think this is a conclusion, so there's reasons I have the conclusion. I won't offer the evidence. You can see for yourself if I'm right or not. Let me say that there's one little bit of evidence I will offer. In the early 1900s, the elites of the time started a wave of let's all suck down radioactive drinks. Most people are not aware of this, but radioactivity in little tiny drinks like energy drinks today became so popular that people were overdosing and dying of drinking radium drinks. But it all stemmed because the elites sucked radiation. We still hear that is true today. That there's a particular component to their vibrational sequence that can deal with radiation in a greater sense better than the larger mass of humanity. Thus, it makes my mind think that this is one of the vehicles they've chosen for their grand elimination scheme for most of humanity.
Really now?
Is to radiate us all, okay? So it is my way of thinking that there will be no solutions, even though there are dozens available. Different kinds of dealing with ways of different dealing with radioactive material to de-radioactivize it, so to speak,
Yeah.
or ways like I was thinking with the containment vessels to totally contain it, let it exhaust itself, and we can worry about it later. I don't think any of those will be successful because I think the powers that be are working desperately at the moment in their final days from whatever it is that they fear. Whatever it is that they fear is very close, and they're doing all of this stuff right now, and they just don't care any longer because they don't have to. So they've ensconced and hidden these time guys away. I've heard it's the same thing as happened in India. India was very big in time research, and some of the top names can't be reached because I was going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
To hell with it. Who cares if it's an American or an Indian or a Japanese,
Sure.
or anybody? Let's just fix this, right? We're all humans on Earth. And so I was going to go there, and I found some very great difficulty getting through to people. And I actually had some conduits that I thought would work. And these guys ran into walls and said, something's happened. I can't get at these people. And yet, I saw them 8 weeks ago at so-and-so's wedding. So something's going on, and I think the powers that be want us to be irradiated and will do other things to cause more irradiation. And so I'm making preparations at a personal level to deal with that world.
Oh boy! So this is something that is meant to happen. Hence, we don't get any effort and manpower really on the fix.
Sure, and all you get is TEPCO and lip service, and you know.
Yeah. Is there anything that indicates that the whole Fukushima event will be a point in some way in history or in mankind's journey that this will be the instigator for us to step it up and move towards a new level of, I don't know, understanding, a new level of dealing with things, or something that causes a schism point here, or is it, or are we screwed? Are we screwed?
I don't know. Maybe right. We may be screwed, but at the same time, we may come to that deathbed realization because there is a weirdness. We have this concept of a temporal echo, pre-echo and post-echo to an event within model space. It exists because basically model space for me is like this virtual aquarium filled with all these little hot dots, so to speak, in various colors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I progress it back and forth in time by doing things with my software to say move ahead a day or go back a day, that kind of thing, right? The way you would scroll through a calendar. Only when I scroll through a calendar, I don't get days. The giant aquarium just changes the organization of the hotspots. And so sometimes you get color indications, hue indications, or intensity indications within the various different little pixels in a particular reference point that show up in the same spot, in the same lexical area, separated by time. And so and this we call an echo. And it's an echo if the color is within the same color scheme, and the hue is within the same hue scheme, and the intensity is within a particular range. And the tighter it echoes, the more I have a tendency to pay attention to it. And we've got a very tight echo that occurs between July 10th and December 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the December 14th component of the echo brings up a word that does not exist in the initial lexical set, and that is the word resolution. Now, that is a broad, huge, ambiguous term.
It sure is. Yeah.
Okay, we could resolve the crisis, hooray, or we could all resolve ourselves to the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
No hooray. Okay, same word, virtually the same sentence construction, yet entirely diametrically opposed positions. So as of this point, I have not enough, because of the nature of the change in language, I don't have enough data for me to say that far out what's going to happen December 14th. Because of the nature of the change in language, I've got a real good shot of saying what's going to occur in July as I go forward in the process of making this next report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because we're dealing with immediacy language that sort of burns itself out in like 30 days or so, as the overwhelming values I've got, I'm hesitant to say one way or another what the resolve word means relative to this situation in that echo on December 14th, but I'm really sure it's going to come up.
Very interesting. It's yeah, well, we have to see where this pans out. I go from tragedy and hope. Sometimes I just choose not to think about it too much and focus on it. I mean, at the end of the day, if we I think there's things we can do. There's always that individually and how we if we're meant to do this or not. We're going to. There's going to be a way that we're going to find, and we're going to continue the human experience. But it's very disheartening, obviously listening about this stuff, and it's not much coverage on the Fukushima disaster at all at this point. And if it's allowed to happen, even worse. And it's very frustrating.
It was made
very
to happen. That's even worse,
Yeah.
So, and there you have to reconcile yourself to a planet filled with individuals that are so psychopathic that they would easily kill off billions of us, that would see that suffering and stuff. And this is the horror part, Let me tell you a little story up here in that orphanage where they put all the 20 yards of soil over the top of the graves that were all of all the little children that were around the orphanage that were all sacrificed. These are indigenous people. They didn't sacrifice any white kids. They went out and they rounded up all these kids at the families under the auspices of the Crown's authority and said, "Oh, you're not teaching these kids right. We're going to haul them into our schools." 50% of those kids did not ever return to their families.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, when the Queen and her scum-sucking, foul-boweled husband showed up here for a review of their crown territories a while back, and we're talking a couple of decades ago, they took back with them 10 kids from this orphanage, none of whom have ever been seen again. And those 10 children were selected out of a group of 30 children. And those 10 were the ones that hustled their ass fastest to kiss the white shoe of the Queen. The others saved. They were saved. Two of those 20, wondered, what happened to my brother? What happened to my sister? And they made a big stink about it. Years later. Well, they've both been killed here recently. Last couple of years, they've both been killed. One of them went into a hospital for a minor procedure, didn't come out. And I won't go into the death of the other one because it reveals too much. But they were both murdered because they were asking too many questions about these, literally blood-drinking, pedophilic, evil scum bastards that we call the elite. If you've got people like myself out there willing to say that, knowing I'm a dead man, I'm dead from the radiation, I'm dead from being born. You're dead the moment you're born, so what the hell? I at least have come to a reconciliation of my own ability to take suffering. I've got, I don't think if we went and counted them, probably well over 1,000 stitches, maybe more in my life. And I know how to take pain. So, it's like, okay, guys, I'm only in pain until the consciousness leaves me. And at that point, you can't harm me anymore. So the most you can do is kill this body. So let's bring it on. I'll tell you exactly what I think of you. I'm not going to hold back. It's 2012. We're going to go through some really horrific shit at the end of this period of time. And I'm saying it now. I'm not swearing an oath or anything, but I'm saying that if I survive long enough and I am presented by universe with that opportunity for retribution, I will allow myself to do so. I will succumb to that nature that is made in me by universe as a warrior, and I will take my revenge if it should allow it, if universe should grant that. And that's my karmic load, and I'm willing to accept that. And so you got people like myself, old, pissed off, tough, that are just saying, fuck it, you want to fight? Come and find me. I'm not hiding. And I know you for who you are, and hey, I'm one of those guys. I can see you on the stream coming before you even get here. So, let's really get into it. And that's the scary part for them. They don't like, there's this famous story out there. It was told to me by somebody else. I don't know if David Icke has ever told about it or not. But I'll tell about it because a person witnessed this, and this person told the story to me, so I've heard it that firsthand. David Icke had occasion to encounter, I think it was a Rockefeller, and I think they were at an airport. It was in transit. It was in transportation. They were both transiting, and their paths crossed. And this individual that observed the encounter between David Icke and this other individual, this person that talked to me, didn't know. I'm supplying that I think it was a Rockefeller. He didn't know who this fat old white guy was that was staring so intently at David Icke, and they had this few words. But this guy, who is a regular sheeple kind of a person, saw that power person, gold, bling all over him, attendees, entourage, all of this kind of stuff, right? Saw that power person visibly vibrate to the point where it was disconcerting to my source. Okay, and so my buddy here says he didn't know what he saw, and that's why I think that he's quite legit in reporting this particular. He knew David Icke. Later, he said, "Oh, I saw that guy." When I was showing him a video, and he said, "I know him. I was, and I was at this airport, and this weird thing happened." And I've had enough weird things happen that my friend who's just a sheeple guy going around doing his job, being a regular slave and stuff. He had a brief occurrence, a touch with reality. And what I think was going on then was that I think that they encountered somebody, and because of personal experiences I've had with some really wealthy people that are twisted bastards, and strange things around it, I think that that individual that Ike encountered was an adept. Okay, because some of the people among the powers that be are adepts above their ability. Okay, let's categorize reality for a second. We'll do this slice and dice thing, right? There's two types of people in reality: those who can do math.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's just a joke. Now there's actually two types.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Okay. There's two types of people in reality, and there are the people that are sorcerers, and then there are magicians. And there's a difference between the two. And so we can think of a sorcerer as a person that uses equipment, tools, dowsers, ritualists, the priests. Okay, those are sorcerers. That's why I always refer to the Vaticus as the palace of the sorcerers, which is what the word actually means, the Vatican. Okay, but then there's magicians. Now, magicians are the people that are discussed in the books like The Science of Yoga and the Hui Ming Ching and some of the Taoist stuff. And the magicians can be classed into various different groups: novice, skilled, adept, master, and then whatever it is beyond the master. And I think that David Icke encountered somebody that was an adept, somebody that has internalized certain skills through practices that of whatever kind that give them this level of ability, and that they were actually scanning Icke to see what kind of a being he was, what kind of a human he was, right? And that during that process, because of what I know from that process, you have to basically concentrate so much energy outgoing that you're not able to maintain your connection to the universal face, your universal consciousness, if you will, that maintains your body. And so this is where we get that rampant internet rumor about all the people doing the shape-shifting.
Yeah.
Okay, now a lot of that caught on video is not shape-shifting. It's an artifact of the software and how the software
I've never seen that at all. I know about video compression and stuff, and I know that the block, or, the artifacts that's created when you compress video or whatever creates definitely weird effects. So I would agree with you there. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't trust any of the video ones, but I've actually seen it occur in person, and I've seen it occur in real time where these individuals are so concentrated in the energy of the moment that their connection to the universal consciousness that maintains their body is overwhelmed. Because bear in mind, they're laying a template over that. If you look at David Icke's and other people's theories, what happens is these particular bloodlines are bred such that their tenuous connection through the Shoshona to the materium is disrupted, and another being comes into that body to experience the pleasures of material world, because these other beings are operating at a vibrational level where they don't have pain and pleasure because it exists only through the materium, through the condensate. And so they come down here and they take over a body in order to do things that are, for us, horrific, because they derive sensation from it, and sensation is good for them. They're sensation addicts.
There's no classification that what is good or bad behavior or to produce the sense of things. Basically.
The sensation, correct. Yeah. And in fact, they go for wherever the most sensation is that you can possibly get. So they want the most horrific level of intensity, which is, so far as we're concerned, goes to fear, death, horror, maiming, etc. Right? Yeah. And so they create all these practices that keep feeding them.
Now, just a quick question there. Is this voluntary from the people who allow them to go through them, or is that involuntary?
I don't know. I'm not one of those beings, so I would be speculation on my part. Right. I'm not one of those people that will tell you I know when I don't. And that's one of the things that, if I ask somebody and they say, geez, dude, I'm just out here bumbling in the dark like you and I haven't got a fucking clue as to what's going on, hey, I'll talk to that guy. But if you've got somebody that says, oh, I know this, I know that, no, they're scamming you. They're selling some point of view, right? So no, I don't know. I'm not one of those people. I would hate to think that the being that was born into George W. Bush's body is still trapped there.
Oof, yeah.
I would hate to think that he's participating in that horror that grew out of him. Same thing with the senior Bush or Barbara Bush, you know. Any of these individuals, the Queen. In fact, the Queen's actually exposed herself here with this new end of the Jubilee or whatever the hell it is, photo session. Man, I don't know, but if you're vibrationally astute and you look at those photos, not only is the symbolism all throughout there, but there's a vibrational glitch in there that she's not aware she's projecting. I don't know that other people see it because my wife doesn't. And that brings up something else. Let's divert for a quick second here and let me piss off somebody else. That's the guys with the Thrive movie, right? Okay, Catherine Austin Fitz. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yeah, we had her on the program once. Yeah.
Okay, I adore her. She's just a marvelous human. I think she's probably one of the best stand-up humans on the planet. She knows the guy who created Thrive. She contacted me to tell me that she knew him. She thought he was a good guy, that he'd been struggling with all this for years. And I love Catherine. I think she's just the heart and soul of what we've got to be going for. And I've got to say that I unfortunately this time I have to discount her opinion. Not that she's wrong, but that I can't accept that because of the issue of the symbology, because of the issue of the vibration, and because this guy's a rich bastard. Now, I am admittedly prejudiced against the rich. Never met one I liked or that I had any thought as a regular human, you know, any especially inherited money. Oh, these people are terrible. But getting beyond that, here's my problem with this. And I can put it to you. I can say to you, do you remember the period of time in which you were becoming aware?
Yeah, bits of it.
Okay.
Parts
how long
of it.
did it take? Yeah. How long did it take before you ran across the idea of Illuminati symbolism?
Pretty quick.
Okay.
In that process, yeah.
Okay. The guys who made the Thrive movie, when they were asked about the symbology within their movie, blew it off. Foster just blew it off when they asked him in the Webbot forum. They said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Oh yeah, I can see how you could take our poster as the all-seeing eye."
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, hey, let me tell you, the all-seeing eye is the most potent symbol that they've got. It's the top dog symbol. All others stem from that, and I found 13 other Illuminati symbols within that poster alone. I found 250 in the first 40 minutes of that movie, and so my thing for him is okay. He claims to be an Aikido-ka. He claims to be awake and aware in spite of being, in spite of the pressure of being a rich bastard. Okay, if he's awake and aware and he came through it being rich, hey, more power to him. I grant you that this guy's got some real core key going for him, right? But I'm actually calling bullshit on him because what I'm saying is that I, as an individual, am calling bullshit on you, Thrive producers, because I cannot understand how anybody could put 8 damn years of work into a movie that supposedly details their awakening experience and their new understanding of the planet and not understand that a symbol is worth 20,000 pictures, each of which is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
So that's bogus. Either he was totally unaware and if he's a player, he's a player and he caused this symbolic abortion that is the Thrive movement, or he's a dupe. Can't have it both ways. Can't have it anything other than that. And so, yeah, I probably pissed him off. And there's all those people that want Thrive to be real, but they want to believe. They want to believe. So the Illuminati, anytime you want to believe, they're going to throw it out there for you.
Oh, okay. So then I'm back in that question that we touched upon in the first hour a little bit. In other words, there is an interest to try to thwart or sidetrack, then, if you will, if we look at it from your point of view, the so-called truth movement. That there's something going on here. People are picking up on this stuff. We need to get in there. We need to take things over or hijack it in one way. Is that what you think is going on, or how would we motivate that?
I know that is the case. In fact, I can trace it with my work. That's why I'm under attack so fiercely, is because we are able to trace all of the, as I put it out there, the talking points. That's why I know Drake is a tool, because the talking points he's presenting were written by someone else for him to present. Whether he believes that or not is immaterial. Because a lot of these people that are tools don't understand their tools, just like Wilcock doesn't understand his role as being a useful idiot. And I'm sure I don't grasp my role either in anything close to its entirety. But indeed, there is a concerted method or movement to overthrow and distract and disrupt and dislodge and break up any concerted growth towards greater enlightenment of the species. The fact that we're enlightening ourselves regardless of that huge amount of energy and put to stop us tells me that there's also an outside impetus towards that. And I'm at the point right now where I'm saying it's energetic. It's coming from the materium. And so let's take religion and all that crap out of it. It's not a divine creation thing or any of that. We've got billions and billions and billions, as you know, Sagan would say, although he never really did use that phrase. But we've got billions and billions of beings that are all standing around together in a giant crowd, and we create in the space between us the materium that you and I are inhabiting. Mm-hmm. That's one way to look at reality, okay? And we are consciously creating it continuously in our giant consciousness selves. And that's consciousness with a big damn C. And you and I are consciousness with a little tiny c. And consciousness with a big damn C out there probably got ticked off at what's going on. And so they're sending in waves that are forcing consciousness with a little c in what they think of as like a virtual reality, like a video game, to change. And the little arrogant, evil, dirty, rotten, Luciferian, scum-sucking bastard Queen and cohort, Federal Reserve, Club of Rome, all of these guys that are working for the space alien agenda on the other side are working desperately to stop that change. They're working desperately to fracture us, to not allow us to come together.